In this video, I'll talk a little bit about your assignment planning activities. So, before your minor assignments, before your major assignments, you'll have the opportunity to complete one of these planning activities. Like it says on the screen, it doesn't count towards your grade. So, it's not for marks, but this is one of those things that if you complete it, it'll go a long ways to ensuring your success on the assignment itself. So, by completing this, by working through it, reading the examples, answering the questions, doing some brainstorming, and then referring back to it when you're actually writing, that's the best thing you can do to make sure you succeed and do well on the actual assignment. So let's start looking at this one. So this starts with some instructions on a personal narrative paragraph, how you're responding to one nonfiction reading. You need a main idea, a personal narrative, a well-constructed paragraph. So it'll always start with kind of some, an overview of the assignment, a brief description of what you're going to be doing. So let's attempt. As usual, it's called a quiz, not actually a quiz. That's just what Moodle calls it, but we'll get in here. They'll usually start like this. So most assignment planning activities will start with an example. So this is an example that instructors have chosen as a good example of what you'll be completing. Now, that doesn't mean that yours has to look exactly like this or it has to be similar in really any way. This is your chance to kind of see, here's one example of what someone has completed that is a strong example of the finished product. You can look at this, you can kind of pick it apart, see what they did well, maybe see what could be improved, because this isn't necessarily like 100% perfect. There might be typos, there might be issues. It's an example of one response that, for whatever reason, is a strong example of what could be done on this assignment. So, as usual, you start working through this, maybe read the example from the student, and then there'll usually be some questions about it, like what's their main idea? I'll just choose randomly. Maybe I'll start filling in, okay, their personal example. I'll write, it could be jot form, it could be complete sentences. It's totally up to you. But as you're working through this, these questions are meant to kind of, usually point something out and remind you of what you're supposed to be doing on this assignment. So really, the questions are kind of leading and saying, notice this, or did you notice this, just to make sure you're on the right track when you start your own. So there's a little bit more information about a raft for this example. And at that point, I've completed this first page on the example. I'll move to the next page once we're there. So if that was the example page, this is the actual planning page. It says it's time to start planning our own paragraph here. In this case, you choose which reading you want to respond to, and then you start your own brainstorming. Like, what topics does it deal with? What main idea? Personal example. I'm just pretending to fill some in here. This one's asking for some supporting details. There's a few spots to put here. Maybe, I don't know, just kind of brainstorm whatever details. In either case, I'm just slowly working through this, brainstorming ideas. It doesn't have to be complete sentences, but let's pretend I've worked through all of this. I'm going to hit finish attempt. Once we're here, notice it saved some of my answers. I didn't fill in everything. Now, let's say I need to step away for a little bit, or I want to come back to this planning later. I haven't submitted yet, so I could always come back into this later, come back in, log back into Moodle, start again, and maybe I want to finish those ones that I didn't answer. So I could go back through, come back, work on it a little bit more. But when I am done my planning, when I'm done my planning, I'm ready to start writing, if I hit submit, as usual on one of these quiz style activities, when I hit submit, it's going to give me a chance to review, and it'll usually give me a little bit of feedback as well. For example, like this one asking what's the main idea, I got this one incorrect, and it's giving me some feedback about why my answer wasn't correct, what maybe the actual main idea is. And you notice for a lot of them, as I go through here, there's some feedback embedded in it. So I can go back and maybe double check, how did I do? Am I on the right track? And often there'll be maybe some tips or some ideas about what you could work on or what you could improve based on your answers during that planning. So I've filled it out. I've submitted. I've gone back and reviewed. I'm ready to start my actual assignment. However, like I said, you can always come back to this later. You can come back, maybe, you want to come back and find that main idea you wrote down. If I come back in here, find my main idea. I could come back and actually maybe copy this and paste this into my actual assignment. I might want to actually drag things over. That's totally okay. It's encouraged, in fact. Use this planning, refer back to it so that when you start your actual assignment, you've got all this planning out of the way and you're ready to go. So that is your first planning activity. And like I said, there'll be one of these before most of your minor assignments and your major assignments. If you have any questions about how to use these planning activities, or if you want some feedback on your planning, as always, contact your instructor.